Welcome back, and of course, welcome aboard to another episode of Building History. Today we're building the Revell Monogram F-4J Phantom II. This particular kit carries a little bit of personal history here at the Building History headquarters. Like many of you, I won't say all of you, but I would say probably many of you probably got started in the hobby because your father or a parent or someone else got you a kit. Maybe built it with you for the first time. And for me, this is that kit. This is the first kit that my dad got for me. We built together, and this kit started the whole habit now that I got that I haven't been able to kick since. My plan was to do this kit as much out of box as I could. I've been wanting to build it again with new skills, better skills hopefully, and just see what I could do out of the box with a kit of this age. And while it didn't turn out exactly the way I had pictured it in my head, I feel like it did come out better than the first time I built it all those years ago. No offense, Dad and younger me, but that first kit, it was garbage. Now, back by popular demand, to talk about the history of the F4 Phantom is my lovely wife Rebecca, Mrs. Building History. Take it away.
Thanks, sweetie. I, of course, am Rebecca, affectionately known as Mrs. Building History, and today we have a new episode. Let's dive in, shall we? Over the Hai Duong rail yards in North Vietnam on May 10th, 1972, a date that would turn out to be the deadliest in the air war over Vietnam, Lieutenant Matt Connolly and his Rio, Lieutenant Thomas Blonsky, hear a voice yell out over the radio, "I got a Ming on my tail!" No other information though, like who or where this person was. Connolly jumped into action, scanning the area, and found an A-7 in a turn with a MiG-17 in chase. Definitely not a place you want to be in. The MiG-17 was an exceptionally nimble aircraft in a turning fight. Connolly rolled in on the MiG and, despite having no tone, fires a sidewinder anyway. It, of course, misses, but the MiG pulls vertical and Connolly pursues. What they see now is 20 U.S. planes and 20 to 25 MiGs all swirling around in the largest dogfight of the Vietnam War. Connolly, continuing pursuit, pulls up behind the MiG, launching an AIM-9 sidewinder straight up that MiG's tailpipe. He soon finds himself behind another MiG, this time with good tone, and he fires another sidewinder. But just as he fires, he loses tone and the missile begins to corkscrew out of control. Somehow, though, it still finds its mark and blows the tail off the MiG. Both Lieutenant Connolly and Lieutenant Blonsky would be awarded the Navy Cross for their actions that day. The McDonnell Aircraft Company approached the Navy with an unsolicited offer for a new fighter based off their current model, the Demon. It was an updated version that they dubbed the Super Demon. The Navy said, "No, we already have a fighter. We don't have need for a new one, but what we do need is an interceptor." So in May 1955, the U.S. Navy presented McDonnell with a set of requirements for an all-weather fleet defense interceptor. McDonnell reworked a design that had been in the works since 1953. Its unconventional looks leading some to joke that the company had bent some up, bent some down, added some parts. It was a triumph of thrust over aerodynamics, and with that, the XF-4H-1 was born and made its maiden flight on May 27, 1958. This design, however, soon found itself in a stiff competition for the job with the XF-8U-3, an upgraded version of the Vought Crusader dubbed ever so creatively as the Super Crusader. However, the McDonnell prototype eventually prevailed in the fly-off despite being less maneuverable than its competition, and it was declared the winner on December 17, 1958, and the F-4H-1 Phantom II was born. That is a mouthful. Originally named the Satan, definitely not a good name, which the Navy then quickly said was not going to, all puns intended, fly, McDonnell then named it after their own earlier fighter, the F-H-1 Phantom, which was the Navy's first purely jet-powered fighter. In one of the few instances where the sequel becomes more famous than the original, the Phantom II, designed as requested by the Navy as a fleet interceptor, soon proved itself to be an outstanding bomber and fighter, one of the first true multi-role aircraft in the Navy's history. The Navy was eager to demonstrate to the world, and of course all its enemies, the capability of its newest toy, weapon system. So it went out to break almost every aviation record at the time. The second XF-4H-1 prototype broke multiple time-to-climb records, including a zoom climb to 98,577 feet in an unbelievable 6.19 minutes. I hope all you aircraft aficionados know how awesome that is, because I have no idea. It also set multiple speed records. All in all, between 1959 and 1962, the Phantom set 16 speed and altitude world records. The Department of Defense and the aircraft manufacturers at the time had deemed that the time of the dogfight was over. In fact, the Navy even went so far as banning the practice of aerial combat maneuvering. Doesn't sound like a smart move to me, but let's see what happens. But alas, those in power decided that the era of the gunfight was over and new wars would now only be fought with missiles launched from miles and miles away. That sounds familiar.
I'm not making the same mistakes again.
So the F-4 was designed without, you guessed it, an internal gun, something for which Dan Peterson, the first officer in charge and creator of Top Gun, said he would never forgive the Navy for. The same people in charge who said that the era of the dogfight was over, then of course decreed the rules of engagement over Vietnam. Of course they did, stating that you couldn't engage unless you could visibly identify the enemy, thus eliminating the entire advantage of long-range missiles. Also, if you're close enough to visually identify a MiG, you're typically too close to use your missiles, which were notoriously unreliable in those days anyway. And our pilots were finding themselves in dogfights without any training on how to fight in those conditions and without the proper weapons to do so. In fact, the Navy Fighter Weapons School, better known as Top Gun, was established in 1969 to teach air-to-air combat tactics in the Phantom, specifically against MiGs. The Navy's kill-to-loss ratio before the halt to the bombing campaign in 1968 was an abysmal 2.42 to 1. By the time that aerial activity over North Vietnam began again in the early 1970s, most Navy squadrons had at least one Top Gun graduate among their ranks. After the implementation of Top Gun, the results were dramatic, with the Navy's kill-to-loss ratio soaring to 12.5 to 1. The first operational Navy squadrons to receive the F-4B, which was the first production variant of the Phantom, was VF-121 pacemakers in 1961. Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, pushing for a unified fighter for all branches of the military, that sounds familiar, forced the Air Force into looking at the Phantom for its own use as well. The Air Force was reluctant to use an airframe not specifically designed for its forces. It was initially hesitant, but nonetheless went through with the flight testing and immediately fell in love. The Air Force received its first F-4Cs, the USAF version of the F-4B, in May of 1963. The F-4J variant improved on the B model's air-to-air and air-to-ground capabilities, with the first examples reaching the fleet in 1966. A total of 522 J models were built between 1966 and 1972. The F-4J did come equipped with two massive J79 GE-10 engines, each capable of 17,844 pounds of thrust. The J model also served with the Blue Angels from 69 to 74, and it had the distinction of being the very last U.S. aircraft based in Southeast Asia. Phantom production ended in 1979 after a staggering 5,195 examples having been built, making it the most produced U.S. supersonic fighter in history, second only to the MiG-21 in total numbers. The F-4 was fully retired by the Navy and Naval Reserve in 1987. However, the F-4 did remain in naval service until 2004 as target drones, but does continue to operate even today in air forces around the world. VF-96, the Fighting Falcons, first deployed to Vietnam in 1964, and on April 9, 1965, VF-96 shot down a Chinese MiG-17, marking the F-4 Phantom's first air-to-air victory. However, the event was downplayed and kept quiet as possible for fears of provoking China and drawing them officially into the conflict. The air battle that raged on May 10, 1972, over the Haiduang rail yards was arguably the most intense of the entire war. U.S. pilots shot down 11 MiGs, the most ever in a single day. Lieutenant Randall Cunningham and Lieutenant William Driscoll launched off the USS Constellation on May 10, 1972, as a bomber against the Haiduang rail yards, flying the CAG's aircraft. Its radio call sign, Showtime 100, and the subject of today's build. After dropping their bombs, they were immediately attacked by a MiG-17, which was moving way too fast to turn tight. Showtime 100 turns into the MiG, causing him to overshoot. Cunningham then reverses back into the enemy. He's now positioned perfectly behind the MiG. He fires an AIM-9 Sidewinder, and the MiG explodes. It's their third kill of the war after two prior victories on previous engagements. He now finds 8 MiGs have established themselves in a defensive wheel with some F-4s mixed in. Showtime 100 engages the MiG that is angling on their XO. "Break right!" he calls to the XO and lets off another perfect shot. And MiG number 4 falls from the sky. Showtime 100 disengages and begins to run for home when he sees another MiG-17 coming at him head on. "I'm gonna scare this guy," Cunningham told his Rio.
"We're head to head. I can't believe we're doing this."
When the wing root of the MiG light up as it starts firing at them. "Oh yeah, the MiG has guns!" Showtime goes vertical, expecting the MiG to continue running straight. Instead, the MiG has followed them into the vertical and they find themselves canopy to canopy. Cunningham lights the afterburners and pulls out ahead, finding himself in the worst possible place to be, which is right in front of the MiG, who immediately begins firing again. The Phantom noses down, the MiG follows, matching them, move for move.
This gets good.
Up and down 3 times they did the dance, described by Lieutenant Driscoll as a knife fight in a telephone booth, one gaining the advantage on the other before forcing an overshoot, and they begin the cycle all over again. The rule here is, there are no rules, and there are no points for second place. As they pitch once more into the vertical, Lieutenant Cunningham gambles it all by pulling the throttles to idle, popping the speed brakes, and dropping the flaps.
I'm gonna hit the brakes, he'll fly right by.
The MiG shoots out in front. The Phantom, now tickling the edge of a stall, flying the Phantom on the very edge of its flight envelope, hoping, praying that the MiG will break first. It did. The MiG stalled first, and now realizing the predicament he was in, began to run. The Phantom follows, now heading straight down, he unleashes a Sidewinder and it flies straight up the MiG's tailpipe and explodes. Insert explosion sound right there. Lieutenant Cunningham lights the big burners of the Phantom's J-79 engines, burning 2 holes into the hot, humid air over North Vietnam, and heads for the coast and the safety of the aircraft carrier. But halfway to the coast, a SAM SA-2 streaks up towards them and explodes. The airplane yaws violently and rolls on its back. Not wanting to become a POW, an almost certainty if they eject over this populated area of North Vietnam, Lieutenant Cunningham coaxes the plane 20 miles towards the shore, the hydraulics failing and the airplane is on fire right up to just behind Lieutenant Driscoll. At the shoreline, the Phantom begins to tumble out of control, the entire tail section having been separated from the aircraft. Lieutenant Cunningham had previously briefed Driscoll that if they ever had to eject, he'd give the command, "Eject! Eject! Eject!" And on the third eject, Driscoll would then pull the handle. On this day, Cunningham states that he started to say and boom, Driscoll punches out of the airplane. They end up landing in the water and are picked up by the Navy rescue helicopters. For shooting the MiG off their XO's tail while being chased by several other enemy planes, they were awarded the Navy Cross. With the 3 kills on May 10th, Lieutenant Cunningham and Lieutenant Driscoll became the first U.S. aces of the Vietnam War. They ended up being the only naval aces of the war and the last Navy aces since. They both went on to instruct at Top Gun. Cunningham went on to become a U.S. congressman, but regrettably tarnished his legacy later when he was accused and later pled guilty to accepting bribes, mail fraud, wire fraud, and tax evasion. He served 8 years in prison and was released in 2013. In 2021, he received a conditional pardon from President Trump. Willie Driscoll went into real estate but continues to give lectures at Top Gun and has talked to every Top Gun class since. The Phantom's legacy lives on, and despite some of its less than stellar nicknames, for example the Iron Sled, Old Smoky, or the Double Ugly, it remains an iconic aircraft that has more than proved herself as not only an interceptor but as a bomber, a fighter, and the world's leading distributor of MiG parts. The Phantom continues to be celebrated by those who flew her and by aviation enthusiasts around the world. Thank you so much for joining us on this brief look into the history of the F-4J Phantom. Please give this video a quick like and leave a comment down below, and if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel. And to all of our subscribers out there, thank you so much for your continued support. We do truly appreciate it. In between episodes, you can follow along with the builds in real time on Instagram and Facebook. The links are in the description below. You can also email the show at buildinghistorymodels@gmail.com. Once again, thank you so much for watching. We hope you'll join us for the next episode of Building History. Until next time.